Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Impact Hour. It's Thursday at 1 o'clock, my favorite time of the week. We have a great one for you today on such an important issue that is happening right now, immigration and mental health. And we've been looking forward to having Ana on Impact Hour for quite a while now. So I'm really excited about hearing the information that she has to share. Ana Hernandez is actually an alumni from our program. She got her MSSW in 2018. Before that, she worked for the Office of the Associate Dean of Research in accounting and was also a student in Latin American Studies. And she got her BS at UT in 2015. So it's great to have such a committed Longhorn doing this type of work. Ana is a research and program coordinator at Girasol, which is a program that is affiliated with the Child and Family Wellness Institute. I hope I got that right. And she's been working with us for since she was a student, and we're so excited to have this information. I'm going to turn it over to Ana, and we will have some time at the end for questions. So you can either put them in the chat, or we will begin taking questions around 12:45. And with that, I pass it over to Ana.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's good to be here and be able to share some about my experience in this work, and particularly in this moment, ways that you all can also get involved as we see an increased need for social workers and a focus on mental health to support immigrants, particularly in tech. So before I start, I want to give a shout out to Brody Amos, who is currently doing his final field placement with Girasol. So I'm glad that he's here and can answer questions maybe too when we get to them about our work. So to get started, I just want to share a little bit about myself, and then I'll go ahead and share my screen and just give you a brief overview of our work and some current issues that are coming up within immigration, and have plenty of time for questions about myself, about social work in immigration, and getting involved with Girasol. So as was mentioned, I'm Ana Hernández. I'm the program coordinator and creator of Girasol, which is a program at the Texas Institute for Child and Family Wellbeing in the Steve Hicks School of Social Work. And all of our work focuses on the intersection of immigration and mental health. And we do this through a variety of programs and supports. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so y'all can see a little bit of what that looks like. So as was mentioned, I have my master's in social work and Latin American studies from UT. Can y'all see the slides okay? Is that showing up? Okay, awesome. I see nodding. That's great. So I definitely am happy to field questions in the chat, as was mentioned, throughout. So please feel free to stay active in there and let me know if there are things that come up that you're curious about as I'm talking today. So Girasol has 4 different program areas, and this is how we carry out our mission of supporting the well-being and mental health of all immigrant families by creating really global networks of professionals that have the training to do so. So starting with our trainings and consulting program, we actually provide trainings to many different professionals throughout the country on immigration and mental health. Specifically, we train attorneys on trauma-informed interviewing. We train social workers and other mental health folks or case managers on working with mixed status families. And we've been focusing a lot in the last year on supporting the well-being of providers in navigating secondary trauma, grief, and community healing. We also consult with organizations that have attorneys and social workers to help them create programs that are trauma informed, both for the clients that they work with and for themselves. In our mental health collaborative, we provide trainings and coordination for mental health professionals to write letters for immigration cases. And so for those letters, we actually are able to make an impact in legal cases for immigrants. So a lot of the time, as you may imagine, folks who have experienced immigration have also experienced trauma, and particularly layered trauma. And oftentimes that's, as we know, not something that's necessarily visible. And so because we need to be able to show some of the psychological or emotional impacts, we oftentimes, those letters can actually make a big difference. I think I had an issue with sharing. Let's go back to the slides. Y'all able to see them still? I had a phone call come in. I'm gonna put myself on Do Not Disturb. Sorry about that. And try that again. Very odd. Apologies. All right. Oops. So for the mental health collaborative, as I was saying, we actually train folks on how to do these assessments, how to write letters for cases, and how to then work with attorneys throughout the process. So we have a particular project with ISIS. We've been able to assign around 40 cases, and we've even provided letters for immigrant folks in detention to help families get out of immigrant detention. Our social work detention response team is actually how all of this work started. And so I'll show you some pictures in a little bit that I was finally able to pull for you guys today. But in our response team, we've actually taken social work students in interdisciplinary teams with law students to the Carnes Detention Center and the Hutto Detention Center. Carnes has historically held immigrant families, and Hutto has held immigrant women in detention. To support them in navigating the legal cases in detention centers in a way that also is trauma informed. So it really supports the case and the education that's needed to create transparency in the system that does not provide transparency, as well as ensuring that there's that human connection and emotional support through the process. We've also taken social work students on 4 volunteer trips to the border, where we have focused on solidarity work with partner organizations to support some of the families that have either just crossed or during the Remain in Mexico or MPP policy that was put in place toward the end of 2019, we actually crossed the border and were able to support some of the folks that were in some of the camps that had been set up and some that still remain there to this day, when under the Trump administration, essentially barely anyone was able to cross. Lastly, Navegando Austin is our resource website. This is where we list information in Austin about resources that are accessible to folks regardless of legal status. That is something that our awesome grad student, Jacob Rodriguez, helps us update on a regular basis. And we definitely encourage you, if you haven't already, to go check it out. I'm going to go ahead and put the information in the chat. So within those 4 programs, you can see how we combine our efforts to really build out community support, professional knowledge, student education. As someone who started a lot of this work as a social work graduate student, I care a lot about students being able to be engaged from the beginning, and that when you graduate, you're ready to jump in and already know a lot of things about working with immigrant communities and supporting their mental health and well-being. So I'll definitely be presenting toward the end some possibilities and opportunities for you to get involved in these different programs. So just a few pictures you can see, because I miss being in person and I miss all these people. But these are some pictures from our border trips. On the left side, we're in the McAllen bus station. There we were supporting some of the folks in navigating, understanding what their packets were saying. It was all in English, and seeing a map of the US and where they were going, and providing backpacks, which fortunately our School of Social Work actually really helped a lot in providing donations that we were able to take with us to the border. You can imagine people with young kids who are going to be on a bus for 2 or 3 days. Being able to have some diapers and other necessary supplies is really helpful as well. On the right side, that's where we're going to support folks who were staying in some of those camps with, again, some additional resources, and always sort of plugging into those organizations that already are doing that great work at the border. Here you can see us on the left side, that's a whole group of social workers, and on the right side, it's a combination of social work students and law students. And again, they're trained in interdisciplinary teams to go to detention centers and be able to support folks in navigating that legal process. So a lot of the things we're doing now, as I will mention, had to become virtual, as so many things have over the last year. There's starting to be some in-person opportunities, and of course still virtual opportunities to get involved in this work. But a lot of what we've seen shift is a lack of access to detention centers because no one can get in. And so that's been kind of a current event that has been sustained over the last year, that we have seen as a trend, and has made it challenging to provide legal and other services to folks in detention during COVID, in addition to some of the health risks of COVID in detention. So a lot of folks have been advocating to actually release folks from detention, particularly because asylum seekers, who are the folks we've worked with, haven't committed any crimes to be placed in detention in the first place. And so it's really important to understand the reasons for some of these advocacy pieces, and why detention in and of itself can cause social, emotional, psychological, physical negative impacts for children, for families, for adults. Some current updates I want to share with you all, kind of literally as they're happening. We've been working on some responses through our response team for the last few weeks, with the current increase in unaccompanied minors who are being let in to the border. And I say being let in because I think it's really important to recognize the political context in which this is all happening. We've seen this happen over time. Unaccompanied minors in particular, in 2014, we saw an increase of folks that were migrating. But a lot of what happens in terms of our government's response at the border is a closing up and then an opening over time of migration that's allowed to happen. And so under the Trump administration, we saw an extreme closing up under the migration protection protocols, or what was called the Remain in Mexico policy, where almost no one was crossing, right? And now under the Biden administration, we're seeing an opening of allowing folks to cross the border, but we're not seeing any kind of different policy plan that was put in place before allowing this, before creating space for more folks to come. So it's not that we shouldn't be providing support to asylum seekers, and it's not that we should be maintaining those former restrictions. It's more that if we don't have a solid support plan, and as you all know, especially if you've worked with, foster or like the CPS system, if there's not a plan in place to support migrants, and particularly children who are migrating by themselves, we can get into a lot of tricky situations of not having enough capacity, not having enough folks trained in trauma, not having enough resources. So that's where we find ourselves today. And that's why we are really trying to spearhead a social work response that's as coordinated as possible to be able to provide some of that expertise and support. So one thing that I won't do a deep dive into, but that's important to note, is that most immigrant detention is under DHS, the Department of Homeland Security. And that's where individual adults and families are held in detention centers. That's been most of where our work has actually happened. But the Office of Refugee Resettlement is a different kind of branch of our federal government, and they actually coordinate the unaccompanied minors, which oftentimes are contracted out through different shelters throughout the US. And then unaccompanied minors are held in those shelters until they can be reunited with a sponsor, usually a family member in the United States. And so it's just important to know that those are two different systems happening at the same time and not get them confused. ORR shelters for unaccompanied minors also aren't the same system as our state foster care systems. So just to make sure we kind of have those separated, I think that's really important context that oftentimes gets misconstrued or confused in media narratives, so important to know. What we're seeing is unaccompanied minors who I put a definition up here because not everyone knows what that means, but they're non-US citizen children below or youth below the age of 18 who arrive unaccompanied by an adult. And even though that's the definition that's given, I put IE parent because specifically if someone is not accompanied by a biological parent, then they are not able to be detained together. So, for example, if someone crossed, for example, a grandson with their grandmother, the grandmother might be detained in individual adult detention while the grandson was detained in an ORR shelter. And that's just an example of our very limited definitions and understandings of family within the nuclear family concept that's very kind of a Western idea of family that gets perpetuated within our detention system and works to further separate families over time. So the government is estimating that by September, as many as 22 to 26,000 unaccompanied minors will arrive at the border each month and require federal care. And they have set up literally within about a week to a week and a half, about 10 large emergency facilities, many of which are in Texas. So we were literally receiving calls from different contacts around the state who know Dr. Monica Faulkner, our director, myself, saying, we have a new facility in Dallas, in Houston, in San Antonio. They're bringing this many thousands of teens, and there's not enough people to help. We need people, we need social workers. So it has been this kind of hectic experience. And that's something that I kind of want to mention as part of why we actually started Girasol in the first place, is that the immigration system oftentimes manufactures chaos and crisis in this way. And that oftentimes limits the types of responses that we can have. So, if you've taken a class on trauma or you're familiar with trauma work, you know that trauma is defined in its being unexpected, in its crisis feeling, in its overwhelm, in its non-predictability, right? And so the immigration system oftentimes, and I say manufactures because as I mentioned, we could have a system in place that we don't, creates these moments of crisis that are, in my opinion, unnecessary. And then kind of that ripple effect of crisis oftentimes means that we're responding in crisis ourselves. So we were seeing this, especially during the Trump administration, there'd be new immigration restrictions and policies every other week. And part of why our work has become so relevant to attorneys is because there was kind of a breaking point that was reached during that administration where folks realized they really needed support, not just for their clients and doing trauma-informed work, but also for themselves in creating sustainable work, being able to make it through without the secondary trauma or even just primary trauma, or burnout affecting their ability to continue doing this work that they're so passionate about. So I'd like to recognize these systemic pieces. I think they're very important because as social workers, I think we have an incredibly important role in intervening in a way that is not based in crisis. And that's really what Girasol is all about. So we always say we want to respond to crisis while not being in crisis. And that's part of our approach to combining this mental health and immigration piece and integrating that throughout all of our work. So I'll kind of mention on the next slide some of the responses we've made to that. But I just wanted to mention as of, I think this article is April 9th. So things are moving fast enough. These numbers could be totally different. But the most recent numbers I could find were 8,500 children. A lot of them are teens too. So let's take that word with some nuance, I guess, are living in these pop-up sites. We know of at least the San Antonio, Dallas, and Houston facilities. And 4,000 more are waiting to be transferred from border facilities, which are oftentimes the ones you'll see in the news that are like the conditions are even worse oftentimes in those particular facilities. So what are we doing? So at Girasol, we have created a hub on our site. So I took a screenshot so y'all can see, and I'm actually gonna make sure that y'all have our site in the chat here. So it's girasoltexas.org. And on our site on the far right, we've created a new tab that you can click on called Unaccompanied Minors Response. And there you can go through and actually see all the updates that we're providing whenever they happen of ways to get involved, whether that be virtually or in person. As I mentioned, our response team has really been focused on engaging social work students and providing them with the skills and knowledge to support the well-being of immigrants. And so we have been hosting immigration dialogues virtually. We have one coming up this Tuesday that I'm excited to share with you all. That's a monthly dialogue where we actually talk about alternatives to detention and a more communal liberatory approach that we hope to take that's focused on mental health and well-being. But at the same time, we're responding to things as they arise, just like we would go to the border and support folks there. So if this is just a great place, this hub we've created to learn more and check in on different opportunities as they come up. If you're interested in supporting this work, as I've mentioned some of the context, and particularly if you are interested in work with children and families, this is a really great way to find that intersection with immigration as well. Right now, we're seeing a lot of the unaccompanied minors speak Spanish or indigenous languages from Latin America, particularly Central America. Of course, I'm talking about like thousands of languages, so there's not a particular one I could mention, but if you do speak Spanish or an indigenous language, you could potentially be very helpful in this work, and I encourage you to sign up to help. I'll share links today about different ways to get involved. So speaking of which, I want to leave enough time for questions about some of the overview I've given for sure, whether that's questions about myself and my background, Girasol's work, or getting involved. I definitely recommend you join our listserv. So that's the contact sub-tab under about on girasoltexas.org. I just shared in the chat. That way you get our monthly newsletter to let you know about updates, the different ways to get involved. You also can see past newsletters on our website so that you don't have to miss anything we've shared previously. You can also volunteer either virtually or in person to support unaccompanied minors. So as I mentioned, when I stop sharing, I'll put that link in there. We actually have a sign up. It's the same one listed on our hub page, and you can let us know if you're interested in virtual, in person, both. Of course, we want to bear in mind COVID safety and geographical location and everything. So please just share what you're comfortable with. But there may be opportunities for translation, even maybe some light case management coming up soon. So we're just kind of storing the information of folks that are interested, and we'll reach out according to what you say that you might be interested in doing. You can attend Girasol trainings. We have one coming up on supporting the well-being of mixed status families. And then we also have one in May on writing those mental health assessments. If you're interested, even if you're a student, you don't have your license yet, you can attend those and join the collaboratives. That's the next thing on here. When you join our mental health collaborative, you'll get access to sample letters for the kind that you might write for an immigration case. You'll get access to assessment tools and all kinds of other supports so that you can start to conceptualize how you might want to write a letter. And you do not need to speak a language other than English to join the collaborative and write letters for immigration cases. There aren't just Spanish speakers, there's a lot of languages, and we often use interpreters. So feel free to join those efforts. And if you are a student, once you get licensed, you can jump in and be ready to hit the ground running writing these letters. We have our upcoming immigration dialogue this coming Tuesday from 5:30 to 7, and we'll be talking more in depth about the unaccompanied minors response. So we'd love to have you join us. This is going to be, if you look us up as Girasol on Eventbrite, or if you look at our previous newsletter, you should be able to find information there. And then we also have a Slack advocacy channel where you can actually join us to be able to get more updates about both the unaccompanied minors response right now, as well as additional opportunities to get involved in advocacy work. Great question. I am going to close out this screen so we can see each other again, and I'll go ahead and put links to each of these in the chat as I take your questions. So feel free always to reach out to us at girasoltexas@gmail.com, and we will do our best to get back to you. And again, our website is a great place for more information. All right, happy to answer questions. Feel free to unmute yourselves or or type in the chat, whatever feels good.
Anna, I have a question for you. I'm just wondering if you could kind of tell us um, if we were to go volunteer and what could we expect, like showing up? If, like, say our Spanish was kind of broken, maybe we could speak a little bit, but we have other skills that we want to use. What could we expect in terms of volunteering?
At the unaccompanied minor shelters?
Yes.
Yeah, so because there's still a shortage of volunteers, there's a lot of different opportunities to get involved. So, what you can expect with us is that there will be at least one lead. For example, I know our director is going again this coming Monday. And so you'll have someone there to kind of help support and guide you through the process. That'll either be a lead from our end here or someone that we work with in San Antonio. We're only coordinating volunteer efforts in San Antonio, but there is information if you're in a different city like Houston or Dallas. We're trying to upload contact information and sign up forms when we have them on the hub so that you can get in touch with those folks. In San Antonio, you can expect to potentially help fill out an intake form that's both in English and Spanish. So if you know some Spanish, you'll have the translation, like you'll have both, you'll have your prompts to say in Spanish, but you'll know what it is in English. So that's something that you could go through that's really helpful. There are also, if you don't speak any Spanish or an indigenous language, could be opportunities with some of the younger kiddos to still do some play or coloring. We're trying to also get our workbooks out into the world. So if you see on our response page, I might just share our response page so you can see it. We've actually created a workbook for women in detention that we are going to modify for teens and then provide with coloring. And then there's also other opportunities that may arise, like sorting through donations or other sort of like basic volunteer tasks that don't even involve interaction. I think a lot of y'all would have a lot of great social work skills and interaction. So that I think would be great if you do have some Spanish language skills. So just to show you this page, you can see this is our hub. This is where we've provided some background information. We also have our general volunteer interest form, which I encourage y'all to fill out. I'll go ahead and post that in the chat. And then if you're interested in a shift, we'll be posting more probably on a weekly basis. And so if you don't see one, just check it again and you'll see others pop up. We're using Sign Up Genius. So that's for San Antonio. If you feel comfortable doing in-person volunteering, the general interest form, if you're interested in either in-person or virtual, this is where we'll know how to contact you as opportunities arise. And then we are also, as I mentioned, are putting forms and points of contact in other cities. We know folks are in different places, particularly during COVID. So feel free to check those out if those are more convenient, or if you just have connections with folks in those cities. We're going to be adding training materials and actually starting some debriefing groups. That's another opportunity for you social workers and students. If you want to fill out that form and let us know, one of the options is co-facilitating debriefing groups. We're going to get those started on about a weekly basis so that anyone volunteering can join and process their experiences, again, as part of our efforts to maintain a trauma-informed approach and experience for everyone. And then this is what I was referring to as our workbook. So this is Girasol's trauma-informed workbook for women in detention. Y'all can check this out as a resource for yourselves and your clients. But again, we're working on a modified teen version. So this is all in Spanish. We have Lilas helping us with multiple translations, but we have everything from talking about some basic symptoms of trauma, to having some coloring pages throughout, to having different activities. I spent 3 years facilitating a support group for immigrant women at the Hutto Detention Center. And from those weekly groups, I really got to know a lot of activities that resonated with folks and allowed us to use metaphor to touch pieces that needed to be supported without diving into trauma work in a way that was disruptive, particularly in an unsafe space, like a detention center. And so for families, we have some validating phrases for children. We have some breathing exercises, some more activities, some more coloring pages, just kind of giving you a little overview. You're welcome to check this out yourselves. This is an activity about hope. We have some grounding activities, like if you were a garden, kind of drawing that out, what waters your garden, what feeds your garden, things like
Anna,
that.
are these resources available for anybody to use
Mhm.
when
Absolutely.
working with? Okay, it's great.
Absolutely. So we have some printed copies where one of our big goals, aside from getting these training materials up for you all, is actually getting the printed workbooks out. Also, we had worked on printing them. We have some funding to print them. We also definitely accept donations on our site if y'all want to help us keep funding the printing of workbooks and things like that in this response effort. So that donation page is pretty easy to find on our website. But we're working on getting those physical copies out, but this is right on that site. You can click into it just like I did from the hub, and y'all can download, print, whatever you want. It's important to me that resources are accessible to everyone. And then just so you see at the end, we do have some opportunities for folks to process a bit of their immigration experience, but we do say that this is for at the end of your journey, and part of creating this as a trauma-informed workbook was putting some of the grounding experiences toward the beginning and the coloring pages, and then at the end, kind of bringing in that psychoeducation, not overwhelming people at the beginning, right? We don't have access to prefrontal cortex unless we're grounded, so that's kind of that perspective. We have this idea of the paths that open forward, distancing from the trauma. So how long ago this happened, how far away you are from what happened, kind of helping people bring that geographically, physically, spatially, and in terms of time. A list of resources in the US and a map of the US. You'd be surprised. I mean, the US is huge, and I don't know that those of us who live here often have a concept for how big compared to some of the countries folks are migrating from. And so being able to be in detention centers for so long, I would hear people say, yeah, I'm going with my aunt in Pennsylvania. Is that close to Texas? And I'd be like, no, actually, it's pretty far. So we were like, we need a map. It's really important to be able to, again, orient ourselves, right? Another trauma-informed concept. We have an explanation of what trauma is, some symptoms, trauma in the body, just some explanation of how that can feel and an opportunity to write or draw how that feels to them. And then the power and control wheel in Spanish, and kind of a validating phrase about this type of experience not being your fault. So that's the workbook. Again, you're welcome to use all of it or pieces of it as it's helpful to you. We'll be getting that teen workbook up hopefully sometime next week. Again, sort of sharing that publicly available with all of you. And I'll go ahead and stop sharing, put some of those links in, and I'm happy to continue answering more questions as well.
Yeah, Anna, thank you for sharing. It's such beautiful and important work that you are doing, and it's really cool to see like the specific tools that you're using. I know another question that we had come up was if you could share what, who are your collaborators, the other organizations that you're working with, other folks working alongside you that maybe students should know about too.
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with some social workers out of the University of Houston, such as Jody Berger Cardoso, who is a point person listed on this site. And then also folks, even other former UT students. So Catherine Lebrun's got her PhD in social work from UT Steve Hicks School of Social Work, and she's now at UT Arlington. So we're working with her and the efforts in Dallas. So it's really great to have these networks and connections of all the social workers out there who are doing this work. But we also work a lot with legal service providers as well. We have very close connections with Raíces and American Gateways. They're less involved in the current unaccompanied minors work, but really significant partners to mention here. Additionally, we've worked nationally with the Vera Institute of Justice, who provides trainings to attorneys and have done some trainings and groups for them, as well as Seneca out of California, who actually has sheltered unaccompanied minors. So we were on a call with them kind of when all of this was first starting, trying to help understand how to best coordinate these efforts. Dean Zayas, of course, at our School of Social Work has been involved throughout this process, and really rallying all of the deans at the different schools of social work in Texas to try to help spread the word about opportunities for students to get involved in this work. So that has also been really great, as well as Will Francis from MSSW Texas. So a lot of really key people you hear in a lot of other settings are also really involved and care about this work as well. And at Girasol, our values are social justice, connection, and growth. And so with connection, a lot of the time we see ourselves as people who can maybe have that bird's eye view and have been in this work long enough that we kind of have had ideas of how it could be done differently and really want to bring the trauma-informed approach. And so oftentimes we're like, point A and point B just need a line here. Otherwise, we might not be able to, have that same intervention happen. And so we're thinking about this on micro, meso, and macro levels. And that's why our partners are also kind of doing work in all these different spaces as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your career and just, what it's like to be a social worker in this field. Because I think about, working with students who might want to go into immigration reform, who may never even, consider that they can write this workbook that could potentially be used all over the world, um, and is so current in terms of trauma informed care. Like, what a great opportunity you've had in your career. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So, as you mentioned at the beginning, we were kind of talking about this before we started. I kind of came into social work from more of the macro lens and then ended up falling in love with all the clinical pieces too. And so I like to do a little bit of everything. I, in undergrad, needed a job. And so I got a job in the accounting department at the School of Social Work. And through that, I really got to learn a lot about social work research. I've always been really interested in research and academia. And the year that I was applying for grad school, they actually created the dual masters in social work and Latin American studies. And in undergrad, I had studied Latin American studies and history. And so it felt kind of meant to be. And myself and one other person who became a very dear friend, we were the first guinea pigs of that dual degree. And so we had the opportunity to kind of choose our own adventure a little bit and kind of figure it out. And since then, there have been many more folks who have done the dual degree, and I've loved getting to know all of them. But it's a lovely balance between some of the social work pieces that are more structured because of the licensing requirements and everything. And then the Latin American Studies Masters, which is a more traditional academic master's where you're doing your original research, writing a thesis, and really getting to build your own classes profile in departments all over the university. And so I really got to learn a lot from my practical experiences and my field placements, as well as get to engage in theory and really understanding and digging deep into history and sociology and other departments around campus. And so that balance, as much as it was also a lot of work for 3 years, provided me with a really great, I think, toolkit to be able to decide what I wanted to do after that. Throughout my graduate program, I was also working at the Texas Institute for Child and Family Wellbeing, where Girasol is housed, as a research assistant, as well as different TA-ships around campus. And so I really got to know our director, Dr. Monica Faulkner, and I took a class with Dr. Lori Cook-Heffron, who was doing her postdoc after finishing her doctorate at UT, on immigration and social work, which is like the only time that class has ever been held. I got really lucky. And she now is leading the social work program at St. Edward's University and is a close collaborator. But her and Monica Faulkner actually asked me they said, we want to take social work students to detention centers. Can you help us figure that out? Like, we'd really like to do that. And you like immigration stuff. I was like, yeah, for sure. That sounds great. So I was able to start kind of working with them on how we would do that and developing trainings, working with the immigration law clinic at UT, and just really starting to bring together the pieces and apply what I was learning in my own field placements. For example, the Spanish field immersion, which again was only one semester it's ever been held, and I got super lucky. I got to do it that semester. I was placed at YWCA Greater Austin, a local org here. That's where I was able to do that Hutto Detention Center group and really get my clinical chops. It was a Spanish field immersion, so I had to have 80% of my work be in Spanish with clients, which is super unusual. And I had supervision in Spanish. So all of that kind of really developed my clinical skills and my passion for clinical work, as well as advocacy that I had already done in undergrad through Amnesty International. So kind of going through that, bringing social work students to detention centers, mostly the Carnes Detention Center. We met Raices, we figured out they needed trauma training. So that kind of naturally evolved into, what if we go give you a trauma-informed interviewing training? And kind of really built a relationship with their family detention team over time. So this is like 2016 into 2017. And then in 2017, we saw ICE raids happen in Austin. And so we had our Navegando Austin site actually was a student initiative that was combined with social work students and undocumented students at UT who I work very closely with, an organization called University Leadership Initiative, who are amazing. And I had the opportunity to kind of help bring everyone together in my different areas on campus and say, we need to provide information about what's safe for people. We were hearing that folks weren't going to school, taking their kids to school. There were like trailer park areas where people weren't, like there was an ICE van parked outside and people couldn't leave their houses and get groceries and things like that. People weren't attending services. And so we were like, we need to share what's actually accessible. We don't see out there information that says, yes, if you're undocumented, A, you can actually receive this service. It's not federally funded, it's not restricted. And B, you can actually feel safe going there. They actually understand how to serve immigrant folks. So that's kind of where Navegando Austin sort of organically came out. As you can tell, and I see something, I kind of have to launch in and like figure something out to work on it and bring people together. So that's kind of my track record or what I like to do. And all of this over time kind of culminated in, this is what I want to do. I really like being able to create these interventions that are helpful and support them and create sustainable work in them. And that led into some strategic planning and development. I learned how to make a logic model and apply for funding to create Girasol as a program out of that institute. And so in fall of 2018, we launched Girasol under its current name with this website and all its information. We were able to get me up to full-time funding within the first 6 months with a lot of kind of grant writing and contract collaboration efforts. And then since there, we've kind of kept going, meeting the need as we see it. When COVID-19 happened, we hosted digital talks within the first month and a half or so to share information from the mental health perspective about supporting immigrant folks during COVID-19, during the pandemic. We had 14 different speakers. We had 2 tracks, one in English and one in Spanish. We had community members and providers attend. So it's always been for us about balancing, meeting the need and having big ideas, but also taking them one step at a time, creating really sustainable networks and partnerships, and getting to think of social work in a holistic way. It's not app versus clinical, everything's integrated, everything is able to be carried out together, right? And so I'm in a really awesome place where I get to kind of decide what I do for my job, which is lovely. And I get to work with really great people like Brody, our intern, who I shouted out earlier, to make things happen. So I guess that's kind of my trajectory to now.
I love that. It sounds like you got lucky, but you were also prepared for the opportunities that you had, and you've been very intentional about your career, which I love to hear that.
Yeah.
Could we hear from Brody Brody could, I had the pleasure of meeting with Brody yesterday. Um, and I'd love to hear from your perspective what it's like to be an intern with Girasol.
Yeah, for sure. Real quick before I go into that, I saw a question in the chat. I wasn't sure if it got answered from Maria about how to join the Slack channel. Was that answered?
No, that's the last link I'm grabbing right now. So
Okay,
you talking will be the perfect buffer
okay,
for
awesome.
me to grab the link.
Sounds good. But yeah, I have had an absolutely wonderful experience with Girasol up to this point. Ana knows this, but immigration was kind of a very new like social justice topic for me coming into the program. But I have in a very short time learned so much about it, and it's really become something that I can definitely see like staying with me throughout the rest of my life in terms of like the big areas that I'm passionate about and that I want to be out in the world fighting for and working with people to make good things happen. It's been really cool seeing how Girasol was able to be one of like the front runners on this response to the unaccompanied youth response with these emergency centers opening up. And so I feel like really cool just to be like even a small part of that. It's been awesome to just work with our Girasol team and also the rest of the Research Institute. They've just been really cool about coming in, jumping on like whatever they can do to help us, make things happen. So it's been a wonderful experience.
What are some of the skills that you've gained, Brody, that maybe you didn't expect when applying for the field placement? Is that putting you on the spot?
No, not at all. No, I've done a lot of really cool things. I think it's been one of the reasons why I chose this internship for Final Field was because it had, I think, the ability to like do a lot of things in like different areas. So I've done a little bit of grant writing. I've done a little bit of like data evaluation kind of things like research building. We submitted like an IRB proposal that was really a really cool experience, just getting like knowledge on the back end of like the research and how that goes, because I don't really have plans to be like a researcher like for the rest of my like professional career, but like all of the information I'm getting from working with the research team at the Institute and seeing how the information is collected and like evaluated and things like that will definitely like help build that foundational knowledge that will just make things easier to work and collaborate with other people in whatever organizations I go to. So that's been something that like wasn't super expected, but has been like a really wonderful experience. I also found out I just like really like making Qualtrics forms, which is like something I wasn't expecting. And then I've gotten to do a lot of like program development, which has been really cool because that's kind of like what has been coming up as like my main passion in terms of like what I enjoy doing and what I really get into. So it's been really cool, like getting all those experiences, but just seeing the little intangible things and skills that I pick up along the way, like how to bring in like Ana's like really amazing clinical knowledge. Like that's been super great to get that insight, because I came into this program as a macro level student. I knew from like the beginning that that's kind of what I wanted to do. But working in the Institute, there are a lot of people who have really amazing clinical backgrounds, and they have like really helped me build the language and the tools and the skills that it takes just to like be a great social worker and just to like communicate well with people. And it's been a great experience.
And sorry, I keep asking questions. Um, this is both for Ana and Brody. Where do y'all kind of see yourselves going from here?
Brody, do you want to go or do you want me to go first?
You can go first. Go.
I feel like don't ask a grad student that.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure it out. No, but I haven't.
Right.
Yeah, I think that y'all probably can tell, have lots of big ideas. And so the task for me is usually breaking them down into steps instead of wanting to do everything all at once. I feel like that's been a growth area for me in grad school and into now. So every program area that I shared with you all, I kind of have the like 5-year vision for each one and for Girasol as a whole. And so If I have the opportunity to, I would love to keep kind of expanding out our work. A goal that I had for us starting last year was to do more work on a national level, because our goal really is to build, as I mentioned, a global community that supports the mental health and well-being of immigrants. And one of the, you may have kind of noticed yourselves, there's like downsides and upsides to this work from home because of COVID situation. One of the things I would not have foreseen has been the national engagement in our trainings once they all went virtual. I started seeing more and more people from other cities in Texas and then other states in the US. And now we've had contracts with folks in New York and California and different areas in the country really interested in this work and some of the supports that we have and the trainings and collaborations. And so I hope to keep growing that. I think that, again, that idea of connection, there's so much duplicative work that happens. So many people trying to kind of reach the same goals and not always talking to one another. And so I really hope we can continue to expand that. We have this kind of long-term vision of like a online learning community that everyone can join together, regardless of, you know, where you're located. So I hope we can keep working toward that and also continue to stay grounded in the reasons that we started this in the first place. So yeah, I hope basically I get to keep doing what I love doing and I'm passionate about. And that's everything here at Girasol, and just keep growing that from there. What about you, Brody?
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, like Anna said, like you ask a grad student that question, it could be anything. And that's kind of where I'm at, like in terms of like my like life trajectory, career trajectory. It's a nice place to be in because I feel like I'm not really like boxed into any like specific thing, but there's like so many things that are available to me. That's one of the reasons why I picked social work, right, as a graduate program, is because of all of the things that I can do with this degree and where it could take me. So I'm really open to like going anywhere in terms of like the social justice areas that like I end up, you know, working in. But one thing that's been great that I have had some wonderful discussions with Anna about is like I really like that she's given me opportunities to like stay involved with Girasol even after my internship ends. Like this is just a 1 semester thing and it feels so short. Like you have like 3.5 months to like do all the things that you want to do and it just doesn't feel like enough time always. But like she's been great about like saying that I can still be involved as a volunteer in the future, and that's wonderful because it's really grown into like something that means a lot to me. So yeah, definitely have plans to do that. I'm hoping that one day, if like, you know, post-pandemic the social work response team thing starts like kicking back into gear, then I would love to like be involved with that if I'm still in Austin or in the Central Texas area. So excited to stay involved with Girasol for sure. And as far as my career goes, like I'm leaving that open. I'm just starting the job hunt kind of thing right now, and I'm looking into things. I'm excited because I think Girasol has like shown me what I enjoy doing in like the professional world. I've learned that I really have a passion for like program development things, volunteer management, things like that. So excited to see where that takes me.
So lots of opportunities for all. We have we do have a private message that came through to me. It says, awesome to see and hear about the way y'all have grown this program. And I love to see that you're a field instructor. That's to Anna. We do love our field instructors. So we have, it's almost the top of the hour. We have a few more minutes. Are there any other questions, or Anna, Brody, do y'all have any closing remarks you'd like to finish us up with?
I'm happy to close, but I'll see if anyone has questions first.
I have a
I do
quick
love
question.
being a supervisor. It's fun. Yeah, Emily?
Anna, do you take BSW interns for fields as well, or just MSW?
That's a good question. So just for, this is actually our first time having an, well, sort of our second time having an intern. We actually took one of the like COVID displaced interns last year who now became our operations coordinator, master grant writer. So that was really cool. Love her, Macy. Shout out to Macy. I think because a lot of our work, as you can tell, plays with the sort of meso macro levels while incorporating clinical ideas throughout. I've been hesitant to take BSW or clinical MSW finals or like first field MSWs, just because I want to make sure that always that we have the proper experience that's needed to be a good fit. And a lot of our work is not quite clinical enough a lot of the time to really make sure you get that experience. So that's something I keep in mind because I do love working with students. And I think there's a lot of opportunities in the like clinical realm that could cross over to be more of a generalist placement. But I think we need to be intentional about building out what those will look like specifically before we provide that opportunity. So like keep a lookout for that, but probably not within the next year or so, particularly while we're virtual. I think the last year was really figuring out how we do what we call Girasol online. And then we'll be kind of figuring out hybrid and all of those pieces. But it's in my brain and it's things I'm thinking about and hoping to do in the future. Any other questions?
All right. Well, Anna and Brody, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience with us here today. It's so wonderful to hear about the scope of opportunities that you have. Just based on growing your career from maybe working individually all the way to doing policy and advocacy. You have opportunities at every level. So I really hope that our audience was able to see that. And thank you for sharing all the resources. We hope that you'll keep in touch with us. And I hope I get to
Definitely.
see you again soon sometime in